Markets have reacted sharply to Mr. Trump's victory, but a key focus now for investors is what might happen to global interest rates. Will they continue slowly decreasing, or will the new policies from the Trump administration cause inflation to remain sticky, keeping rates higher for longer? I caught up with Paul Sheard, a global economist based in New York, a little earlier.
Well, Ed, I think it depends a little bit on which part of the country you're in. I'm in New York, which is not particularly Trump country, but I think there's certainly been, I think, a sense that coming into the election, Donald Trump had more momentum. The polls were pointing in that way, the betting markets are pointing in that way, and he seemed to have a little bit more momentum as a candidate at the end of the campaign. So not a total surprise, but perhaps a landslide aspect, at least in the Electoral College, may have caught a few people by surprise.
Yeah, Trump's got some big policies. He wants to cut taxes, deport illegal immigrants, and put large tariffs on imported goods coming into America. I mean, could all three of these be inflationary? And if so, what does that actually mean for the outlook for rates in the United States?
Right. I think, to be inflationary, of course, that requires a sort of a continuous upward pressure on prices and would require the Federal Reserve not to counter that. The tariff, obviously, some of the threats, if you like, around, big tariff impositions, if they were to ever happen, would have a fairly dramatic effect, but they would probably largely be one-off effects, both on the price level and on the exchange rate level, would add to the cost of living perhaps, but not to the overall sort of continuous rate of inflation. Countering that, of course, you have perhaps some disinflationary forces that might be in the pipeline through a broad deregulation agenda, and particularly in the energy area. One of the election mantras, if you like, of Donald Trump was drill, baby, drill. That's a nightmare for people that are concerned about climate change, but it could provide a bit of a disinflationary boost to the economy through energy prices.
Yeah, well, another big thing has been the Inflation Reduction Act, benefited lots of businesses, particularly in the green energy space in America over the last few years, helped some Aussie companies too that are based in the US. But if that gets partially rescinded by Trump, what could potentially happen then to the green energy sector in America?
Well, I think it will have to operate more under its own steam, Ed. You're absolutely right. Donald Trump is no fan of the Green New Deal. And is probably quite skeptical about the need for a major energy transition to begin with. So I think it's going to be left more up to the private sector to look ahead and see if these new investments are warranted. But it will not have the imprimatur of the US president.
Well, the US Federal Reserve on Thursday, they cut interest rates. And at the press conference, Jerome Powell was asked quite a few questions about whether Donald Trump has the ability to sack him. Could the independence of the US Federal Reserve potentially be at a little bit of risk here over the next 4 years?
I think we'll hear a lot about that theme, Ed. I'm more sort of relaxed about the independence issue. I think what Donald Trump is on more about is, his being able to express a view on interest rates and have a bit of a say, if you like, but not so much, and he's made this point clear, he doesn't really want to interfere in the monetary policy decision-making process itself, but he doesn't like the idea of sort of being bottled up and not being able to have his say. Of course, Jay Powell's term does come up in March, I think it is 2026, a little bit of a runway left for him there. Big question will be whether Donald Trump expresses displeasure and sort of tries to nudge him out of the way. That could get interesting. It could be a little bit of a constitutional crisis around who has the final call on that. That would go to the courts, no doubt. But, hopefully it won't get to that.
And Paul, what's your view on the trajectory for interest rates in the United States? I mean, where do you see them going? How quickly are they going to be falling in America?
Well, I think they're going to continue to come down. At least that's what the Fed has signaled. The 25 basis point cut today was no surprise. I think the market is, 50-50 or a little bit more on a rate cut in December and, maybe 3 more next year. The Fed itself has signaled a little bit more than that. But now with, of course, the change in the administration and generally speaking, a more sort of pro-business, pro-growth agenda likely from the new administration, maybe there won't be a need for as many rate cuts as there was, prior to the election.
Yeah, I was going to ask, could there potentially be a sort of global rebalancing almost of interest rates, the natural place where interest rates will sit long term for economies like the US, Australia, and the UK following this election?
I mean, that's possible, Ed. I mean, economists are always trying to figure out where this sort of mystical R star, that is the natural rate of interest, the interest rate, if you like, the real interest rate that central banks are sort of tracking their monetary policy against. Pre-COVID, that was reckoned to be very, very low, perhaps close to zero in some cases. Now it's sort of considered a little bit higher. But, if we had an economic boom unleashed by the new administration, not beyond the realms of possibility, we could see a little bit of a re-rating, if you like, of interest rate expectations.
And we know, look, the inauguration for Trump won't be until around the 20th of January next year. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot from him and his team between now and then. But is that going to give us, and the markets really, a bit of time to adjust to a potential what Trump 2.0 might look like for America and the world?
I think so. I mean, markets obviously very forward-looking, so they're already looking past the inauguration. But there's going to be a lot of news flow. I mean, one big question will be what exactly will be the sort of priority list of the president? And one area we haven't touched upon, which I think could ultimately be important for markets and economies, is the geopolitical situation. One of Trump's sort of electoral points, again, his electioneering point was, he'll pick up the phone and put an end to this war in Ukraine pretty much the first day, if not before. So, shifts in the geopolitical picture could also ultimately have a big impact on energy markets, food markets, and the global outlook.
Yeah, just on that, when you take a step back and look at the world as a whole, is it becoming less globalised? Is it world becoming more fragmented? I mean, what does that then mean for global trade and cooperation between nations?
That's certainly been a trend the last few years. National security and trade policy and industrial policy have been coming together. And that was a trend, I think, that accelerated under the Biden administration. What's going to happen under Trump, again, it's difficult to predict with any degree of confidence. But if Donald Trump does move to sort of mend fences to a certain extent with, the Putins of this world, the Xi Jinpings of this world, and he has a natural inclination to sort of want to do that, pick up the phone, talk to people, we could see a little bit of a reversal of that fragmentation, that deglobalization trend. But, I think wouldn't want to put too much money on it right at this point in time, but something to keep on the radar screen.
Yeah, Trump's tried to sort of present himself as a strongman leader. I mean, how do you think he stacks up compared to the likes of Putin and Xi Jinping?
Well, that's a treacherous comparison to make. But I think the point is that, what Trump is a deal maker. Trump likes to, or would like to be able to achieve policy successes, whether in the economic realm or the geopolitical realm, which, people are telling him you can't do that. And if you tell him you can't do that, you shouldn't pick up the phone and talk to dictators. He's going to say, well, why not? Isn't it good to make, have communication and maybe sit down and talk with these people? So, I think he's a different kind of leader in that respect. And we did see that in his first term. But it'll be interesting to see if he continues in that particular mold or whether, he gets bottled up with domestic issues and doesn't make as much progress on those foreign affairs issues.
So do you think the world's going to become a more uncertain place over the next 4 years, or will we get more certainty over the next 4 years?
I think it's more uncertain, Ed, in the sense that if we'd had a Harris victory, we would have, I think, been looking at a pretty much a status quo, a continuation of the status quo. I think with Trump, there's a lot more potential outcomes. So in that sense, there's more uncertainty. But, as we move through the next 4 years, as those uncertainties get resolved, I think there's more chance of substantive change. Now, could be a good direction, could be a bad direction. So I think from that point of view, for the investing community, it's a rather interesting time.